All right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us for Spirit Talk today. So this is First Friday Spirit Talk, where we get together on the first Friday of every month at noon to talk about different spiritual and metaphysical topics in depth. I'm your host, Christopher Mitchell, and I'm an astrologer as well. And then we've got Reverend Ginny Brown. She's a clairvoyant counselor. And we've got Scout Bartlett over here, who is a clairsentient energy teacher. So the topic for today is we're going to be exploring the idea of the afterlife, what happens after life, as well as some stuff about the spirit world. And we'll be exploring questions about that. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box and we'll try to weave them in. You can follow us on Facebook for news and upcoming episode information. We also have a YouTube channel where you can watch past episodes. And all donations to the program go to funding the program so we can do it better, and it's much appreciated. So all that said, let's jump in and just start with the big question, right? Like, what happens when this life experience ends? What, like, let's say, like the very next moment. Ginny Brown, do you want to start us off and give us your sense of that?
Yeah, hi everybody, welcome. I've watched a lot of spirit transitions, and it's really by our design what happens. If you believe in there being like family there with you, if you desire like someone to kind of come get you, that's what happens. I've seen people wake up in a memory that they've had that's very pleasant. For instance, I was recently looking at a man who passed, and his spirit transition, he entered into a party where all his friends and his family were there, and that was a part of his transition. And usually the transition itself is very seamless. It's kind of similar to when you go to sleep. When you close your eyes and you fall asleep, you don't know that you've fallen asleep. It's kind of a seamless sort of entryway into the dream world. And it's similar in death. And it just kind of depends on our gripping or our holding onto the body and that part of the experience. But entering into the spirit world is a very seamless and easy transition, and it's by our creative design. And so like as you're experiencing that transition, and as a spirit is going into it, you're often kind of greeted by the spirit world, but it's not fixed. It can look any way that you want. So I often talk to clients who have been on the verge of that, have been on the verge of death, or are approaching it in their mental space, is to design it how you want it to be. Who do you want to be there to greet you? Because even if, like, say it's an animal or a person who has already incarnated, your guides will take the shape of that being or that person and take on their personality in order to help you transition. So if you're very close to like your great great grandfather, who you met once, a guide may take the appearance of in order to help you ease in that transition. And so there's a ton of support that comes in to help you detach from the body and to see the other side as a welcoming interface for you to join into. And so a lot of the fear that we experience is just about change in general. And that shows up all over the place. So in so many different varieties, like just kind of even coming out of quarantine. Right now, I have a lot of extroverted clients who are nervous about reintegrating, even though they know that that's something they want to do. So our relationship to change is typically the only fear that we experience inside that space. And it's a lot easier than we kind of come to think of it. But that immediate piece is how I've seen it and watched it happen over and over again. Scout?
Hey guys, glad you're here. Thanks for coming. Um, This is one of those short questions that has a huge answer. So let me touch on one piece that has shown up a lot for people that I'm working with and that they've been worried about. And that is that as we approach the completion of a lifetime, as our body approaches the point in time when it's going to discontinue processing as a body, our essence or our spirit actually lifts out. We don't hang out in the body experiencing all of that stuff. The body itself will respond as comatose, meaning nobody home. It's not a literal translation, but it's mine. The body itself will translate as comatose, but we lift out. So if it's a startling death or if it's a slow and painful death, we're lifting in and out of the body. And the other piece that I've gotten to observe numerous times is that transition point feels really intimate. So I can tell you that anybody that closes the door in their household when they use the bathroom, and I'm not saying right or wrong, but anybody that closes the door in their house when they use the bathroom, crossing over is even more intimate than using the toilet. And so there's kind of a place of where people actually choose who's there and who's paying attention and who's close and who's not when they do that transition. And I've gotten to watch that. So sometimes people get really worried about the notion of whether or not they're there for that person, or if they'd have just been 5 minutes sooner, or if they'd have just not gotten up and gone to the restroom at that moment, or God, suddenly I'm like toilet commentary, sorry. But it's not that. It's that people actually, it's a really intimate thing to transition. And the people that are in transition really choose who will and who won't be there at the time. And they're able to sort of like, it's been a fun thing I've watched when I used to do a lot of psychic fairs. And sometimes two people would sit down together, you know, the client and their friend, and I would always ask, you know, can your friend hear whatever I have to say so that I don't have to filter? And oh yeah, of course, they can hear anything. And I'm really good at what I do, and so we tend to go pretty deep pretty quickly. And I got to watch at psychic fairs that frequently, right around the time when I was going to get into a topic that might be a little touchy for the client, the friend would suddenly get distracted with something else somewhere else in the fair and go wander off, and we'd cover that topic and they'd wander back again. Same thing with crossing over. People choose who's there and who's in attention. And if they're not comfortable with crossing over with this, that, or the other person who's trying to be there for them, they'll distract them for a moment and have them go be elsewhere. So one of the biggest keys is that one need not worry about whether or not someone crossed over with fewer people than what they would have liked to have had there, or even whether or not they crossed over with nobody else's body in attendance at the time. They choose it, they time it, they work it, we choose it, we time it, we work it, and we make that transition. And we can talk more about the transition, but I wanted to hit that point.
Yeah, well, do you want to add anything else about how you see the transition here before we jump on into some other questions?
There we go. There's the unmute button. I've got to find a better way to do that. So I've had the privilege to be in attendance at the actual transition point for a limited number of people, but I've had the privilege of being able to assist in the transition where my body was not physically present, where their passage was happening. I've had the ability to assist in the transition a number of times. And the shortest version is that my phrasing would be what we've focused on, what we've allowed our background mind chatter to be fixated on, what we've had our thought process fixated on, has a lot to do with how we're going to make that transition. If we're still really attached to the earth plane, I point that way, not my logo. If we're still really attached to the earth plane, and we've got a lot of attachment about being in charge or being in control or making sure that everything's done right, or whatever other attachments we got stuck in during our life, then when we cross over, and I apologize for this, it's kind of, not very much, similar to a little tiny bit, the Ghost Whisperers program, where we could end up, if you thought of it as being that Earth is in one I did it again. If you thought of it as being Earth is in one direction and source is in the other direction, we can end up with our focus fixated in that Earth direction and never turn around to spot the light and go up into the light. But as soon as we do, then we can spot the light and go up into the light. So it's fixation. I had one client that was so anxious about his businesses. Actually, his family got a hold of me to make sure he transitioned well. He was so anxious about his businesses that he had always been the sole detail, probably micromanager, I'm guessing, of that he was tortured with anxiety after he crossed over, but it was just his anxiety and his attachment. Once we interrupted that and he got it, then he made his transition. And as we move up into the light, as we move that up into the light, when we reach a certain point, we reach a level that I just refer to as those who greet. And we are merged with, embraced with, and welcomed by, I'll call it a whole crew of entities with whom we are associated, some of whom we were in this lifetime with, and some of them we've been in other lifetimes with. But that level of those who greet is when I've been given the privilege to walk clients up into that level of those who greet, just my name for it. 2 times when I've been there, I've been able to be there so solidly that guidance let me know that I could make a choice and wish for something, as it were. That's not the right word, but that I could choose something I wanted in that moment and have it. And I've got to tell you, when I've been in that experience, I haven't been able to think of like win the lotto, have $1 billion, my own jet or whatever. All I've been able to think is, oh man, just let me experience what they're experiencing would be the only wish I'd have at that point. It's an exquisite, exquisite thing, and nothing you need to hurry. It's not like you need to hurry up and get out of here so that you get there, get all the experiences you can get here. But when you cross over, it's an exquisite travel. But the more that you clear out the repetitive chatter in the back of your mind, the more that you clear out those places where the back of your mind goes ninga 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 with stuff it's still attached to, the more you clear that out, the more readily you move through and move into that level with those who greet.
Well, that's sure a positive reframe. I like hearing that. So I'm hearing that we personalize.
It turns out that dying is actually more natural than living.
Mm-hmm. As we so we seem to personalize our post-lifetime experience, at least the transition from A to B, is what I'm hearing here, that it's different for each person. But after a point, as we detach from the earth reality and as we lift up higher towards the light, reorient, is there any kind of universal process that starts to take shape? Like I know that life review gets mentioned a lot, or the process of choosing a next life. Are these things built in, or are they just kind of a personal creation for some people as well? Ginny, do you want to pick that up?
Well, we do typically, the process, it depends. Depends kind of on the tragedy of death, or if a spirit is kind of attached to the life that they were just in. I've seen healing pods for where a spirit is kind of awakened very slowly to being in the spirit world, and so that they can kind of come to terms with their death, whether that was a violent means, an accidental means, like just kind of if it was difficult for them, if that transition was extra difficult. So, but there is a kind of transition that happens where we do go to a place of life review. And some of you may have heard of a place called the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records is I kind of like to think of it as a gigantic library that has the history of all. And it's like the history of God, it's the history of you, it has your book of life, it has a record of all that is, and all that was, and all that will be. And we spend time there reviewing our life. And there isn't a judgment on it. It's more of a neutral review of this was what you came in to learn, and this is what you completed. And here are your open, your open books of study, and here are your completions. And it's kind of a way for us to see who we are, where we've been, where we're at, where we're going. And then there's a long period of rest. And in that long period of rest, especially before we come back down to earth, we kind of go into a place of neutrality and forgetfulness. we review our entire life as it's been since creation, and then that gets wiped. And that's what I think a lot of people think of as heaven, this place where you're intermingling with other beings, but it's very neutral. Like I may be mingling with someone I had beef with, in this lifetime, and not knowing that. And it's to give a new start to karma and a new start to your next life, so that person, we can come in as brother and sister and not know why we're pulled together or why there's this tension, so that we get a clean slate, an opportunity to kind of start that over. It's a really beautiful thing. And so in that blank space is when we, as I've seen it, typically decide what we're going to work on next. Like what are big challenges, and we start to choose and connect into beings that we have karma with that are here on the planet, i.e. parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, typically it's family that we're connecting to. And then also the lessons that we want to work on. And so that all gets decided in neutral. It doesn't happen when we're in charge, when we're reviewing our life and kind of looking at what we've done, what we didn't do, that sort of thing. It happens in the blank space, and it's a place for us to be very creative and explore the topics and relationships that we want to develop in the life to come. Scout?
The first part that makes this hardest for me to talk about is that, that'll work. Those mythological stories that we run into as a kid where somebody inadvertently stumbles into fairyland and they spend an afternoon and a night dancing all night in fairyland, and then they come back out of fairyland and the kids that were little kids when they left are now grandparents with young grandchildren of their own because it's gazillions of years later, but they were only in fairyland overnight. Or it could go the other way, which is the harder one to grasp, is you could go live 200 years in fairyland and come back and it's been 8 minutes for the people that are here on the planet. When we cross over, we leave this element of time and space. I know that sounds logical and obvious, but it's not. It's really tricky to wrap your mind around there being no time. I mean, the no space part's easy, but there being no time when we've crossed over. So if we take 200 years worth of time in crossed over space, as it were, to contemplate what we want to do next, we might well be born on the planet again a short amount of time, like, days, weeks, months, years after we crossed over. On the other hand, if we cross over and we think about it for really a moment and we're right on top of it, we may come back into the planet in a time slice on Earth that's 200 years later. There is no time and space. So there's a couple pieces I really want to reinforce. I will say this spring has been fabulous. As we've been coming through April and into May, what I've observed is the theme of this early spring is regret memories, remorse memories, resentment memories, and grief. So it's just been sort of entertaining. But that's the energy we've been immersed in with spring. No different than if I immerse myself into a hot tub, there's going to be a tendency for my muscles to warm up, and probably then their response will be to relax, because that's what I'm immersed in. When we cross over, it's not that we're forced into a life review. We're immersed in an energy of moving up. Well, we're doing this hand, moving up a few notches to see from a more elevated perspective and from a broader perspective than what we have when we're in this time and space perspective of Earth. And it's not like we get our arm twisted up behind our back to do a life review. We're immersed in a place where we come elevated. If you've ever had, I don't know, let's say that you're having a tremendous amount of stress and clench in your workplace, or a dispute with someone in your workplace. And then along it comes that it's time for your 2-week vacation, that you won on a radio program, that's a massage a day and a scuba lesson every day and a nap every day in a private island where everything is served and you just completely wind down and relax. I like that picture. Yeah, I'd be glad to win that. Anyway, so you've left work all clenched up with something, with a coworker or some project, and then you get to like go completely separated from that, so that you're so much into a level of recreation or recreation that your mind is totally distracted, and it's not doing any of the ninga about, and then they this and then they that and then they this, and it's never gonna. It's just completely gotten a chance to get an elevated perspective. When you come back to work again and you walk in, you're not going to be in that same clench with that other person. You're actually going to have, call it a slightly further or a slightly more separated perspective on what the clench was about. Because you'll be looking at it from an elevated distance, and suddenly you could see your part without necessarily having any punitive part about your part. You can see your part, and you can see their part, and you can see where it comes together. So it's not torturous. It's not, and then I this, and then I that. It's like, now I see what was going on with me that made that get clenched up. Now I see what was going on with me that made that get clenched up. And we can actually then sort it together with, and the other time that I went into time and space to take a look at this particular knot in my lessons, I went at it this way and I got this far. And this time I went at it this way and I got this far. And so we start formulating, well, next time that I'm going to go after that knot, which we don't have to go after them every time, but next time I'm going after that knot, let's go after it this way. And then maybe that'll finally break it loose. So there is a place where we meet with, in my pictures, when I get to see these, the picture of it looks like meeting with counsel, which is kind of vague and fuzzy. But we're actually laying out which part of our overall curriculum of lessons that we've taken on as our overall, this much of our curriculum I want to take on in this lifetime. And let me choose parenting that'll screw me up in a way such that I'll hit it from this angle. Let me choose a life path that'll put me in a momentum in a way where I'll hit it from this angle. Let me talk with the other entities that I have close bonding with, so that we can decide that if we've got matching lessons this time, we'll be on the planet at the same time and possibly magnetized to bump into each other and get to play these out with each other. We do all that, although I admit, I swear, the Earth brochure for this lifetime said, oh, you'll get to be there and be a benefit during a huge change of energy. The last time anybody got to do this was Atlantis. This time you'll get to be there in a huge change of energy, and there'll be sunrises and rainbows and sunsets and orgasms and beautiful fabrics and amazing food, and in little tiny print, and all the crap's going to hit the fan at once, and that'll be a really wild ride. We come in at the time and place to do the stuff that we're going to do. We're here now because we decided we wanted to ride this roller coaster of the amazing amount of duality and separateness, and get to play our part in it, even if our part is just trying to stay sane when the rest of the world isn't wanting to play that game.
Yeah, I feel like that that perspective of seeing where we've been is helpful, and we can't resolve it from there. We have to kind of come back into body, as a way to live through it and choose differently, choose the adventure differently the next time.
Yeah, no matter how I focus on it, I can't reshape the model in clay if I'm only looking at it in a photograph.
Right. Right, exactly.
Have to match frequencies, exactly.
Little follow-up to that, and let's just toss it back and forth for like 2 or 3 minutes each, because we're almost at the mid-time meditation. But I'm wondering, does there come a point when we, rather than leaving life review to come back down to earth and do it again, we instead lift up to some even higher level and don't return to the earth experience? Scout's nodding. I'll let him go first.
Yes, but that's, I don't think that that's necessarily a goal. Like, we don't need to be looking at it that way, because Earth is a very rich school and we're here as long as we need to be here. like learning to love this experience and take care of this place versus like hitting the eject button and getting to the next planet or to some idea of something better. I think you can graduate from here, and I think we do. But I would discourage anyone from looking at it as as a goal, because it can kind of push us more into the resistance to being here. And as we know, whatever you resist persists, right? So I wouldn't encourage a disassociation from where you are as where you don't want to be.
Yeah, I was laughing because the first phrase that Ginny said was exactly the phrase I heard in my head. I love that. That's so much fun. And I 100% agree. This is not like I want to go battle the boss at level 57. So let me hand the controller to my big brother and tell him to just play me right through and take all the cheats. You know, let's go look up all the cheats and let's go use all the bonuses to walk right through to level 57 so that I can get out of this level because this level's hard. Any more than it's the game of, you know, let me just stop going into my 4th grade classroom because 4th grade is hard. I'm just going to start showing up at junior high and go to 9th grade instead because 9th grade looks like way more fun. It turns out that to use that word, because that's a perfect word, the goal is do as much as we can do at the frequency we're working at and work in that frequency till we've done as much as we can do in that frequency. All the rest of the analogies fall apart because the goal is not get to the finish line, which is how our conscious, well, let me finish with my earth stuff and then move to that next level and move to that next level and move to that next level and then just, you know, hang out as an angel or as God or whatever title I want to take. It's not that. It's untangle all of the knots and work our way up, untangling those lower level knots and higher level knots and higher level knots, but it's untangle all of the knots. It's not, how can I get through to level 37 and get the gold prize?
See, I'm like World of Warcraft, like a level 999 soul with a sword of Metron and a shield of Michael. But yeah, I hear that idea a lot in spirituality, like that it's, you know, it's not about getting through 2nd grade to get to 3rd grade and getting through high school to get to college. And then by the end of the life, you're like, whoa, I went through the whole thing, but I wasn't with any of it. No, like we hang out with the experience that's being given us. That's cool. Have either of you, Ginny and Scout, tracked whose turn it is to do the meditation this time? I think it's Ginny's turn then. Okay, go for it.
All right, let's take a little break. We're going to focus today on Mother Earth. Since we're talking about so much about spirit transitions, let's receive a little love from her today. So go ahead and just settle in wherever you are and just plant your feet on the floor, flat feet on the floor. Close your eyes. And together, let's just take a nice big deep breath in. And exhale. And let's call our attention to our feet. And say hello to them. Wiggle your toes. And rock your foot heel to toe. Heel to toe. Heel to toe. And say hello to the earth. To its steadiness. To its strength. And at the center of your foot, say hello to your feet chakras. Say hello to the left and to the right. And see the earth energy beneath it. Maybe in a deep forest green or an ocean blue. And invite that energy to move into your feet chakras. Filling your foot, moving up your calf, into your thighs, and around your hips. Feel that support. It's grounding and clearing energy. And love. And ask yourself for a place in your body you've been holding on to stress or tension. Maybe in the mind, shoulders or belly. And see this energy begin to dislodge. And move down, melting into the earth. Creating space. For an answer to come. And allow the earth to recycle this energy for you. To use its density for fuel. And thank the planet. And thank your spirit. And return to the room as you're ready. Just a little earth bath for you today.
Chris, I want to spring this on you. And sorry, I didn't give you a heads up. I have been noticing that for the last 4.5 weeks, I've watched it, and a whole lot of my clients have watched it. What I've summarized is regret, remorse, resentment, and grief. I figure there's got to be we've got to be in some interesting short version astrological aspects right at the moment. And I know you usually track that. I know we didn't actually set this up to prep you to do a segment on that. But is there like some relatively large astrological bulldozer that we're sitting in front of at the moment?
The first thing that comes up for me is Pluto. Well, okay. Over the next year or two, there is a general trending background aspect that is pretty loud and affecting everything, and you see it in current events in the news and in your personal life. And it's Saturn, which is the planet of structure and discipline and tradition, squaring Uranus, which is the planet of change and innovation and progressive energy. So that's ongoing. It's a square where the old is talking with the new. You see that with cryptocurrency, you see that with politics, you see that with like Democrats and Republicans. That's the main background energy for the next year or two, is this ongoing dialogue with it. And so it's prompting change in us and liberation in us. Within that, a week or two ago, Pluto stationed retrograde. And Pluto is the planet of the deep, unconscious, heavy, hardest, most challenging stuff.
What's the word stationed mean?
Yeah, thank you. So stationed planets, most of the time planets appear to be moving forwards when we look at them. In actuality, they're always moving forwards. But from Earth's perspective, they appear to be moving forwards, and then they'll slow down, they'll stop, which is the station, and then they'll start to move backwards, which is the retrograde, and then they'll station again, and then they'll move forwards. And so when a planet stations, it's like being in a crowded room full of people, and then across the room, one person just stops and stares at you. It gets really loud and really weighty because it's standing still, so it gets weightier. And so there's been an increased weight on the energetic of Pluto, which is this heavy, unconscious, difficult stuff. And I can see for a lot of people, depending on their personal charts, depending on their personal unfolding clocks, they could be having grief, remorse, guilt, that kind of heaviness come up. Personally, I've had different kinds of heaviness come up, but I would say that universally that there was an activating of that. And then now it's kind of tracing backwards for 4 or 5 months where we're reviewing, going over again, things that we kind of thought we cleared, but we have to look at them from a different angle. And then we'll start to move forwards again later.
5 months?
4 or 5
months? Oh boy. Oh,
it's loudest when it stations, and then it kind of blends into the stew, and then it becomes more noticeable again as it stations again to move direct. We're getting used to it. As it picks up speed moving backwards, we won't notice it as heavily.
I get it. Thanks so much. I appreciate that.
For sure. And Ginny, thank you for that meditation. That was really nice. Do you get to live there? That was awesome. Speaking kind of plutonic stuff and the guilt, remorse, loss, these kind of energies, I think a great thing to get into here would be that now historically and contemporarily, death and transition is associated in our consciousness, in our ways of thinking, in our collective, with feelings of grief and loss and heaviness. It can be a scary thing and a painful thing. And I wonder, as we continue to heal and evolve and ascend as a planet and as individuals, does our relationship to death start to change and some of that heaviness start to come off of it? Ginny, would you like to start us off on that?
It depends on the individual. You know, if you're here on an emotional journey, that may be a big part of it, to keep you in sway and cleansing and becoming more and more empathic. But you know, as far as like the emotional aspect of it, it has a lot to do with control and perception, in my opinion. You know, like if we think or believe onto it that death is suffering or death is punishment or it should not have happened, then we're setting ourselves up to be in pain and to be in suffering at the thought of that person. But I really love this story from Greek mythology about King Sisyphus. And King Sisyphus was kind of a bad dude, and he was getting punished by Hades. And so Hades finally captures him, brings him to hell. And he was going to chain him up. He was like, you see these chains? I can hold anyone here for all of eternity. And he was like, they don't, King Sisyphus is kind of playing with them. He's like, they don't look that powerful to me. And Death's like, no, seriously, they're the most powerful chains of all time. And he was like, well, I bet they couldn't hold you. And so Hades, of course, falls for the trick and is like, see, look, I can chain myself up. I can't even break out of them. And so Sisyphus escapes death. And while death is chained up in hell, King Sisyphus is just kind of off lollygagging, doing his thing, and there's no death on earth, which means there's a tremendous amount of suffering. There were wars happening. There was sickness. The old couldn't die. It's just a transition. Death is a completion point. And it wasn't until, I forget which goddess comes and frees Hades, and then they finally capture Sisyphus and make him roll a boulder up and down a hill for eternity. But you know, death is a liberation point, and the more we can kind of attune to that, like if you think about someone who has passed in your life and what they were going through, you know, leading up to their death, if you can see them still alive, like put them in that suffering and see if you would really want them to live. That desire in and of itself is extremely selfish. Like we want them to live. But for the people I know who I've been close with who've died of cancer, I wouldn't want to see them continue to be here suffering inside that vessel. You know, so I encourage people to step outside of themselves, outside of how they are going to feel, how the I feels about not having living moments with someone, and to turn it towards the person. And how has death been a relief point? How is death a positive for them? They're being released from suffering, no matter how you look at it, what age they are, what they were going through. It's all a graduation point. And so when we step outside of ourselves, we see, I think you can kind of lean towards they aren't suffering anymore. Scout?
Yeah. Transitions are transitions are transitions are transitions. And there's an aspect of our conscious mind that doesn't like them. There's a part of us, the psychology world refers to the formative years. There's a period of time between about age 2 and age 7 where, as little rookie humans, we observe the world like crazy. Because there's an internal conflict going on. I'll call it an intuitive aspect of us that knows that we are never ending, which isn't exactly true, but it is true that there's no, sorry, let's not get lost in that. But there's an intuitive part that says that we are ongoing, that we existed before this body became our container, and that we continue to exist beyond this body. And then there's this linear mind part of us that just takes in our surrounding world and says, are you kidding me? It's obvious that we're only here as long as the package is here. And there's a debate between those. And so around the age 2, because from 0 to 2, that whole intuitive part is just lollygagging in the crib, taking in the world. Ooh, look, pretty toes. Oh, look, pretty people talking baby talk. Oh, look, puppy. By the way, hi to John's puppy who jumped to the camera a while ago. Say hi. Oh, look, this. Oh, look, that. And all of our attention is available toward whatever it is we have attention on. And then we hit this place where the conscious mind says, because the intuitive mind like falls off of tables and bumps into things and bumps its head. And the conscious mind goes, whoa, dude, you keep doing that, you're going to make us dead. And the intuitive says, dead? I don't know anything about dead. And the conscious mind says, yeah, dead, kaput, gone, no more, we'll be dead. And the intuitive goes, no, we're always. And the conscious mind goes, you're crazy, I'm taking over, which is what gives us that delightful, call it, I believe the popular phrase for it is period of self-recognition twos, or there's some other phrase for it, where I'm taking charge. You can offer a 2-year-old a cookie and they have to be in charge of it. No. Okay, great. No cookie. Great. Want cookie, or however your 2-year-old speaks. Maybe it's full sentences. But for about 7 years or about 5 years there, it observes everything in its surroundings to discover what it is that it does that doesn't make it dead. And then we lock in and we want it to all be the same, because if we keep doing the same stuff, our conscious mind thinks that if we keep doing the same stuff, which some of y'all have noticed you've got to cling to that, we'll never get dead because we're not doing any of the things that might dead us. Roll forward. So our conscious mind is filling a file room in our subconscious with all of these predictions of what our life is going to look like. We meet our new BFF and our mind has all these predictions that our BFF is going to FF. Sorry, that was terrible. That our best friend forever is going to be around forever. You know, they're going to friend forever. And it makes those predictions. And then if they unfriend, or if they do something that we can't put up with, or if their parents move them or whatever, we're in disruption because our brain goes, my whole predicted future is changed. Well, when someone in our world transitions, they move to where they move to, and it's a pretty steady move forward. They can get stuck for eons, and on Earth it's about 10 minutes, or they can get stuck for 10 minutes, and on Earth it's an eon, and none of it matters. Remember, no time, no space. Everybody, key point on that crossed over part, everybody gets all the way through their lessons. You can't get all the way through your lessons before you do, but you can't get all the way through your lessons any later than you did, and you can't do it any sooner for extra credit, and you can't be late and lose points. Everybody gets there. So the one that's transitioned is transitioning with energetic tugs. Oops, that was this way. With energetic tugs back toward the people still on Earth. But it's just energetic tugs back toward Earth, that's all. You know, back toward the connections, not Earth, but the connections. But us on this side of the plane, the veil, all of a sudden, we've got all of these subconscious predictions that had that person being some role, even if it was just, you know, on my birthday, they'll call, or when I get a raise, I always call them, or we've got all these predictions of where they fit in. And now those are all kaput. And so there's a piece of our subconscious mind that is back in the file room going, well, this prediction's no longer accurate, this prediction's no longer accurate, this prediction's no longer accurate, this prediction's no longer accurate. So a whole big chunk of the grieving process from this side of the veil is that subconscious mind sorting through all of its predictions and throwing its hands up and go, well, we don't know our future at all now, we're going to die. And, you know, for some of us, the grieving process includes, and we want to, because we can't imagine life without them, is the phrase, but that's what's going on. So the grieving process is, I mean, there's the sadness and the tears, which is a body response. There's that brain response. And then there's the fact that your life just changed. No different than, you know, if I got a tattoo, my life just changed. It may not be an important tattoo, but my life just changed. From then on, there's the before that person crossed and the after that person crossed life path, but it's still our life path. And our life path is still a matter of finding our way back to where Jenny just was reminding us to go while we're in body, while we're experiencing, finding our way back to that, while we're in body, finding our way back to that, noticing what got our buttons pushed, finding our way back to that. And I don't know which side she is on yours. On my screen, she's that way. Yeah. And that's the process. But the funny part is those that have crossed over, they're doing fine. True. You know, if they were in a state of pain, they're out of that. Once they figure out they don't have to be in that anymore. I mean, I've checked in on people that took a whole lot of drugs and then crossed themselves over. And when I get there, they're still stoned. And there's a moment of having to be able to draw on my college education and remember how to relate with somebody who's that high. I hope I didn't offend anybody. And then we can point out to them that now that they don't have the body, they could be that stoned anytime they want to choose that state. But if they don't want to be lost in that state, they can re-choose into being clear and focused again. So when they do cross over, sometimes there's some confusion they take along because they haven't let go of it all yet. But it's our side of the equation that's the most fascinating part of that education, of having a change and no longer being able to predict our future. And I think I just talked too long.
All good. Let's do one last question, a couple minutes each, and then wrap up. I think a great place to put a bow on it is to ask about our connection with those who've transitioned. If one of us is transitioning, 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 if one of us is those in spirit keep up with us, are still interested in us, and if and how we can connect to them from where we are now. Ginny, would you like to speak to that?
Well, yes, they can, they do, but Earth is a sealed environment for a reason. A lot of times people, they have a partner or someone who transitions that they're very close to, and they can't connect with them, right? And there's a reason for that, because if you could hold on to that connection, you would never move forward here on the planet. And that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to hold on to things. We're here to learn how to let go. And so there's a reason why it's sealed. Now, can they do they? Yes. I do mediumship. I don't know, Scout, do you do mediumship? Little bits?
Kind of, but I don't let them speak through me.
Yeah, similar. I'll talk to them, but I don't give up my body. But in mediumship sessions, sometimes you can bridge a communication gap between the two worlds and to get closure. Sometimes that assists in letting go, but our connection to the spirit world should be for light guidance, clarity, and with always an aim to move forward, only going back if that's what we need to move forward. And some spirits stay very close to Earth. Some stay so close that they become ghosts, some and haunt or get stuck in places where others kind of transition into like a guidance council in certain family lineages who've been incarnating together for a very long time, where people are choosing soul groups. So I've seen where someone transitions and becomes a part of like a guidance council for someone, tapping in, leaving messages or approaching in dreams and whatnot. But spirit, your guides, your guidance council, your, people who've transitioned will communicate to you in ways that you're open to, whether that's through nature, through music, through dreams, or not at all. It depends on where, your openness to it is, and if it's going to be supportive to you. Because if it's not, your actual spirit guides will block that connection. If it's going to hold you into, lock you into an old pattern or keep you from moving forward, they will lovingly and gracefully put up a barrier. Scout?
God, maybe we ought to have some show where we just do ghost stories and stories of interesting ways that people have been contacted. A bunch of years ago, the person to whom I was married passed away. And through whatever stroke of fate, the person I was married to was foolish enough to marry me, but amazingly brilliant. She had other reasons to choose me that we talked about later, and that's another thing. So I'll make a cross-reference that you can get the longer versions of this story if you go on my website and go to radio archives and search through. There's several times I've done shows about life after death and ghosts, and I typically do them around Halloween. So you can search back in the archives. There's, I don't know, 3 or 4 years worth or something, a couple hundred hours worth of radio. But she managed to, what I refer to as, and this is not the set it up with the telegram company and the telegram company sends, no, she managed to send me spiritual telegrams real world level after she crossed over. And there were 6 of them, as I recall, but they were different people that I never would have expected that person. They never would have expected to do that, but they felt such a compulsion that they had to, who got in touch with me awkwardly, because again, they felt compulsion, but not like this is a thing they would do. Because I got psychic friends, it wouldn't have been any big deal. So she was way more clever than that. This is people that don't do this stuff that knew us. On dates, they had no reason to know that the date was specific, with pretty much variations of the same message. And I didn't go public with the message till long after this had finished. So, because I didn't know it was a thing till after it had finished. So pretty much variations on the same message. And she did that to make absolutely certain that I realized and knew, without any belief system required, that we don't end when our body ends, that we do continue forward. I don't have to believe in life after death any more than I have to believe in opposable thumbs being handy if you want to open a pickle jar. It's an absolute truth in my world because of that series of contact and that series of messages. Now, with clients, I've gotten numerous messages, and I do places where I go talk to the people that have crossed over to bring through what my client needs for them to have a sense of peace or connection, or to have the same thing I've got in terms of knowing that that wasn't an ending of their beloved, and that it's not an ending of our connection. All of us have a core essence that is who we really are. And when we encounter other people that are important to us, it's because we have a connection, core essence to core essence, that exists before we're birthed, and it continues to exist after our bodies complete their passage. That connection exists. However, at the same time, if you ever had like a best friend that you had lunch with every day when you guys worked together, and you worked together for several years, and then one or both of you change jobs, we'll have both of you change jobs, so you don't work together anymore. You do keep in touch, but you're not actually paying attention to their day-to-day work details like you were when that was lunch conversation every day. And if you get together, you will still recognize there's a connection, but you'll notice that you don't have as much to talk about, perhaps, when what you talked about was work. Is this working? When we cross over, it's a joke to me because it's really funny, but it's also true. When we cross over, that's the ultimate ADD. We are not grounded at all when we are not grounded, because we're not in time and space and we don't have a body. Breathe, please, everybody. Big, deep breath. That was hard. And so we don't have a grounded tick, 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 earth level, 4-dimensional attention awareness. I don't know if Ginny has the same thing, but part of being able to talk to people that have crossed over is like re-getting their attention and bringing them back on topic if you had a particular topic you wanted to cover, rather than just sort of thought wander. Because we're not grounded when we're not grounded, and we're not linear when we're not linear. And so there is the connection. The connection is ongoing. It draws us back into being, when we're going to be in places, it draws us to be in same places. That which is love is never ending. That which is work topics, as in I'm here on earth doing my work, and you're over there on that side doing your work, that which is work topics is, well, it's not also not never ending, but it also is not always completely in common. So there is that connection and there is that link, but it's not like they're sitting there, you know, it's not like we're even their favorite soap opera that they sit down in a chair and watch for an hour every night after work. They follow what's going on for us emotionally to a certain degree, and they'll really check in if we're radiating, broadcasting emotional distress. But they're not just like, oh, let's see, I don't have anything to do now that I don't have a body. I'm just going to sit here and watch second by incredibly eternal second as they walk through time and space. Yeah, no, no, sorry, you're not that interesting. And yet you are that interesting for them to track where your heart's at and to remember their heart connection.
Perfect timing. It's almost 1 o'clock, and I guess that brings us to the end of this really fascinating episode of Spirit Talk. I'm glad we could explore this in such depth. Ginny and Scout, do you want to let people know where they can find you and what you're up to? And for me, I'm an astrologer. You can find my email in the chat box. And yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up.
My website is right there. Hit me up for individual family counseling, couples counseling, whatever you feel called to do, or mediumship. That is something that I offer if there's some open-ended questions that you have with people who've crossed over and could use some closure. I'm your gal.
And I'm not your gal. She's your gal.
Since when?
Well, all right, I would be your gal.
Oh, thank you.
My website's also down here, or there's a less complicated shortcut, which is just notscott.com. as a part of my, Jenny does a meditation thing. You're still doing that, right? That you're part of your tithing? Yeah. As part of my tithing to the world and the universe, I produce and host a radio program that airs here in the Bay Area, but it also streams and we also archive it. So there's literally a couple hundred hours of that teaching information. In fact, I think 300 or so. There's a lot of hours of that teaching information up on the website. No charge. You do have to register, but we don't even put you on our mailing list from that. So I would ask you to put yourself on my mailing list in addition to that. And then I do individual sessions, and there's a series that people have been finding really beneficial that I call the Acceleration series, where we do an energetic treatment to lift out the inner limitations and set you free. We've got some people here today that have done that series. You can wave if you think it was good. There it is, Rudy's waving. So with all of us, we're here to support and to serve the growth of everybody. We produce this show as well to bring it to you, to make it available. So we do ask you to invite your friends, let them know about it. If your friends are like my friends, you can tell them it's the first Friday of every month. And then when you remind them, they'll ask you why you didn't tell them sooner. But we'd love to have you join us. This is our heart to you, and we thank you for being here. So I love you all, and thank you for being here.
Yep, very much the same. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll be back probably the first Friday of June, which I think is the 4th. Stay tuned to our Facebook page for announcements and links about that. Thanks so much for coming.